Students are too often turned away from high school music course offerings because they don't possess the right kind of talent or experience. Typical band orchestra chorus or BOC programs demand a specific behavior standard, a high expectation of conformity, and little room for personal expression. Many students are interested in making music, but not taking advantage of the school programs being offered. The Inclusion and Equity Challenge for secondary music education is compounded for students with learning disabilities, physical disabilities, behavioral issues, and neurological atypicalities. In this segment of our presentation today, I'll cover 3 areas. First, a little bit about special education law as it pertains to music ed and K-12, and what this means for us in the classroom. Second, a little about universal design for learning as a way of managing and implementing accommodations. Third, strategies I've employed in my classroom. U.S. federal education law holds music teachers responsible for special education inclusion just as it does for teachers of other academic subjects. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, signed into law in 1975, employs a principle of zero reject. Zero reject means that students must have equal access to all aspects of the curriculum, including music education programs. Unfortunately, music teachers rarely receive guidance or instruction on how to implement special education law for their students. In an ironic and cruel twist, students with learning disabilities are also often assigned additional academic remediation instead of music classes or are deemed ineligible for music classes. We need ways to effectively respond. In the U.S., 1 in 5 children have learning and attention issues such as dyslexia and ADHD, but are all too often denied appropriate interventions. We teach these students every day, whether they are identified or not. How are we supposed to handle a classroom full of learners who may need a range of different accommodations? Universal design for learning can help us with successful inclusion. UDL is borrowed from the architectural principle of universal design to provide equitable access for all people. The 3 main guiding principles of UDL are, number 1, providing multiple means of representation, utilizing a variety of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic formats for presenting information. Number 2, providing multiple means of expression, creating a variety of options for students to demonstrate knowledge and understanding. Number 3, providing multiple means of engagement, developing a variety of motivating, challenging, and aged and developmentally appropriate music experiences to enhance learning. Across my students' IEPs, I saw several references to reading. Examples included teach textbook reading strategies, assign reading tasks at appropriate level, and reduce readability level of materials. I made unilateral changes to my standard music notation materials as a response. Nearly all of my students did not read music, so I wanted to make sure I could provide them an easier reading system and not force them through the additional challenge of learning the rules of a 5-line staff and then having to convert it to a 6-string guitar. I could see that standard notation alone would have led to frustration and disengagement. Also, I made adjustments to my supplemental material by modeling it on my chosen textbook. In my notation software, I rewrote all class ensemble pieces in parallel tablature standard notation, making sure the size was big enough to reduce eye fatigue. I also printed these pieces on ivory paper instead of bright white, which a few of my students said they appreciated because it softened the otherwise harsh contrast. It was a lot of work, but I plan to use much of this material again in the future. The delivery of directions was another recurring theme, with some IEP documents specifying directions to be written, others specifying they be read aloud, and still others prescribing repetition and clarification of directions. So I broke my lesson plans into steps, which I could project onto the screen at the front of the classroom. This way, large font written directions were always available for each item in a class session, but I would still give the directions verbally as well to the whole class and to individual students as needed. In this way, I could build the needs of all of my students into my planning. When tablature notation alone proved frustrating, custom YouTube videos would allow students to hear and watch me play selections with the ability to pause, rewind, and change playback speed. Tablature and standard notation can also be incorporated in the videos. As the year went on, I began playing the video first when introducing a new assignment and encouraging students to watch or listen several times before even opening the tablature or notation PDF. I found that some read better if they already had an idea what the piece sounded like. This reduced frustration and increased success for students with Lexile reading difficulty because they were using their sense of hearing as an additional support. A lot of my students seemed afraid of longer assignments, even if a 2-page assignment contained repeated material. I reformulated longer pieces to teach each musically different section as a discrete portion with a label, A, B, etc. Later, we strung the sections together for a performance, i.e. A, B, A, B, A. I like to call out each section at first and then fade out the verbal direction as the class gets more confident. Here, I took a piece that was 6 systems on 2 pages and reduced it to 8 bars total. Finally, I'll sometimes have students learn repeating patterns in music away from the tablature or notation. This takes away the distraction of notation, numbers, lines, and symbols, and puts the focus back on the instrument. This extra work is an investment, not a burden. When I shared some of my adjustments and custom materials with interested colleagues, many seemed impressed that I had seemingly gone to such great lengths on behalf of my students. But I maintain that any time I make something work better for my students, I make an investment not only in their success, but in my own job satisfaction. It would be foolhardy and self-defeating not to make that effort. Another way to put it is that every time I reduce a student's frustration, I reduce my own as well.